Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Scotland's First Minister Nicola Sturgeon has unveiled proposals for Scotland's future relations with Europe after Brexit. She believes it would be possible for Scotland to remain in the European single market even if the rest of the UK left. The UK government has warned that a special deal for Scotland is unrealistic. Here's our Scotland editor, Sarah Smith.
Nicola Sturgeon has a plan. She says it's the only serious plan for Brexit any government has yet come up with. And she argues, just because the UK is leaving the EU, it does not have to leave the single market.
I accept that there is a mandate in England and Wales to take the UK out of the EU. However, I do not accept that there is a mandate to take any part of the UK out of the single market. Scotland could stay in the single market, even if the rest of the UK chooses to leave.
Today's proposals from Nicola Sturgeon are nothing like the red, white and blue Brexit Theresa May talks about. They're more of a bespoke Scottish tartan version. For Scotland to be able to stay in the single market, substantial new powers would need to be devolved. Control over immigration, business regulation and employment law would all need to be transferred north of the border. The mechanics of how it all might work are complex. The Scottish Government say it's essential for businesses like this tartan mill and the Scottish Borders who export into the EU. They claim firms like this could employ EU nationals who would not have the right to work elsewhere in the UK. But it won't be easy.
It'd be legally and politically and technically extremely difficult for Scotland to stay in the single market if the United Kingdom is leaving the EU, because there'd be one set of business regulations applying to Scotland and another set applying to England. That would only be possible if there was a complete devolution of all powers on business regulation.
If Nicola Sturgeon can get a totally different tartan Brexit deal for Scotland, that will be a major political victory. If the Prime Minister ignores her demands, that's not necessarily a total defeat. Sturgeon can use that to strengthen her arguments for a second referendum on Scottish independence. The Prime Minister today dismissed the idea of a separate Scottish deal and warned against a rush to independence.
If Scotland were to become independent, then not only would it no longer be a member of the European Union, it would no longer be a member of the single market of the European Union, and it would no longer be a member of the single market of the United Kingdom. And the single market of the United Kingdom is worth 4 times as much to Scotland as the single market of the European Union.
Trying to weave together the different demands for Brexit could yet strain the bonds that hold the UK together. Sarah Smith, BBC News, Edinburgh.
Now, Scotland inside the single market, even if the rest of the UK is out. That's top of Nicola Sturgeon's wish list as she called for more powers to protect Scottish interests after Brexit. Opposition parties claimed her plan was simply window dressing for independence. So is she really after a second referendum? Our political correspondent Michael Crick reports from Edinburgh.
Where the Westminster government remains opaque about what it wants from the EU, today the SNP government in Edinburgh was blunt. Scotland must stay within the single market.
It is estimated that being outside the single market could cost the Scottish economy 80,000 jobs. Workers could lose £2,000 a year within a decade of a hard Brexit.
But she threatened Theresa May that if her demands were ignored, there'd be a second referendum on independence.
The option of independence must remain on the table. Without this option, Scotland would simply have to accept the inevitability of whatever decisions the UK government makes, no matter how damaging they are to Scotland's interests.
Since Theresa May came to see her here in July, 2 days after becoming PM, Nicola Sturgeon and her colleagues have concluded the May government won't try to stay within the single market or the customs union. Hence, the SNP wants a differential deal for Scotland.
Isn't it just
totally unrealistic to expect Theresa May to go along to these negotiations and say, well, this is what we, the UK, want. Oh, and while I'm here, this is a different arrangement that Scotland wants. You're not going to get a deal in those circumstances.
Scotland has been told repeatedly, it was told this very forcibly in the independence referendum 2 years ago, that the UK is a partnership of equals. Now, I'm simply making the point that if that is to mean something in reality as opposed to just in rhetoric, then surely there must be a willingness to find a way that effectively squares the circle of the different outcomes in different parts of the UK. Will it be easy? No.
Coffee, please, and a hot chocolate, please.
This economist chairs Nicola Sturgeon's Council of Advisors on Europe. One of those advisors today said it was extremely difficult to see how the SNP plan would work legally, technically or politically. But Anton Muscatelli disagrees.
Is this really practical, that the UK leaves the European Union but that Scotland remains in the single market?
I think it is practical, it is technically and legally feasible.
But if there was freedom of movement between Scotland and the rest of the European Union, but wouldn't this mean that people would just use Scotland as a backdoor way to getting into England and Wales?
That misunderstands a key issue, which is around the control of immigration. Most of the control of immigration doesn't happen in borders, because borders are where visitors come in as well as people who intend to reside. All of that could be done by regulation in the labour market and employers. We see that already around the world. There are differential visa arrangements depending on where people want to reside.
So the Scottish exports to the rest of the United Kingdom.
But Tories say Scotland should concentrate on its more important economic relationship with the rest of the UK.
And if the Scottish Government were really serious about working with Theresa May's government to try and secure the best Brexit deal, not just for Scotland but for the whole of the UK, then they would drop their sabre-rattling about independence, they would drop their sabre-rattling about a second independence referendum, and they would get on with the job of working with the UK to get the best possible Brexit deal for all of us.
And today, Theresa May told MPs Scottish independence would be the worst of all worlds.
If Scotland were to become independent, then not only would it no longer be a member of the European Union, it would no longer be a member of the single market of the European Union, and it would no longer be a member of the single market of the United Kingdom. And the single market of the United Kingdom is worth 4 times as much to Scotland as the single market of the European Union.
As Theresa May prepares finally to set out her stall for negotiations next spring, she's promised to consider the Scottish Government's plans carefully. But they're an extra complication she'd rather do without.
Well, I think it's pretty unlikely that in the next few weeks Theresa May is going to agree to the contents of this document, particularly on the single market, not least because it might lead to others, Northern Ireland, Wales, maybe even London, demanding their own separate deals. And quite frankly, the European deal is going to be complicated enough on its own. But it wouldn't necessarily mean either there would be a second referendum, because at the end of the day, the Scottish Government is only going to have a second referendum if it thinks it can win a second referendum. But if the British Government rejects these plans on the single market, then that might change the atmosphere here and make it rather easier to convince public opinion here this time they should go for independence.
Michael, thanks very much.
I've been getting away with it all